want to start by saying this is a big move for Argentina, and kind of begin by giving us the headline takeaways, if you will, why this is so significant and why unions are demonstrating right now and so vocal in their opposition.
Thanks for having me, Sean. This is certainly a key landmark for Argentina. For reference, the core of the labor law dates from 1974 with a major reform in 1976. That was during the last Argentine dictatorship. So a reform of the labor laws was due from a long time ago. As to what this reform is changing, well, it is broad and it covers a variety of items, as well was said prior to my intervention, in terms of how severance pay is calculated, in terms of how daily hours of work are calculated, how holidays are provided to employees, but also in terms of restriction of certain striking capabilities by the unions, the declaration of several sectors as energy, as critical logistics, as air transport, as telecommunications as essential, which severely restricts the capability of workers in those sectors to strike.
Right.
Also an incentive into small businesses hiring, because the truth is that Argentina's economy over the past few decades has created almost none private employment. Half of the economy remains in what we call the black economy or the informal economy, so far away from state protections and state regulations. So this law is intended to be able to expand the scope of the lawful economy and to protect more workers, but by bringing more workers into the registered market.
Okay, so how did Milei's government really win over lawmakers? Because Milei has been steadfast in telling the country, look, these changes are going to be very painful at times.
Indeed. Well, of course, the last midterm elections, which occurred late last year, certainly bolstered the support of Milei. He won the election fair and square and by a huge margin. That certainly convinced what could be called as the moderate opposition, and especially the governors, which have a huge sway under Argentina's federal system and have heavy influence in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, to support the administration. But more than that, what we are seeing is a government that is now far more politically mature, far more astute, that it is willing to compromise and negotiate with the most moderate opposition and accept changes, not only to pass law, but to pass it with ample majorities. This bill in the Senate was passed with 42 votes against 30,
right,
which is quite a lot. And for the Peronism, the hard opposition, this is a very odd situation because they haven't had lost control of the Senate in almost 30 years since democracy returned. So what we're seeing is a government that is far more comfortable on its feet and doing politics and playing politics the way it's intended to be. And they are doing it quite well. And they are achieving increasingly great majorities. For example, now the EU-Mercosur free trade agreement was approved with almost 200 votes in favor, only 40-something against,
right,
which again speaks to the government's ability to pass this legislation.
And I also wanted, you talked earlier that overhaul was needed, that this kind of goes back to 1974, but really the country's support of labor goes all the way back to the 50s and 40s, if I'm not mistaken. So how have these changes been received by economists? Because, the public, and we talked about its labor support, and it's very significant, and this is going to be a very significant change. So how is it going to move forward, run the risk of having more demonstrations in the street by workers who are used to getting money from the government rather than the private sector?
Well, as you say, Sean, of course, the economists, the businessmen, the entrepreneurs, of course, they were going to support such changes into the law. But the key interesting thing here is that the support for the changes doesn't come only from the pro-business leaders. Of course, you were going to expect certain unrest from the typical sectors of society, certain pushback from the unions, and especially a violent unrest from far-left protesters.
Right.
But the key thing here is that what used to be Argentina's economy, as you said, the labor movement was a key sector throughout its history. But the thing is, as their extension over the population retracted, with more population being covered by the informal economy, with more people being contracted as contractors or being entrepreneurial on themselves, the power of the unions to mobilize support for them has been significantly reduced.
Interesting.
Also, the general perception of corruption and cronyism and corporatism within the unions certainly diminished popular support for them. And so again, the protests are certainly a lot smaller than what used to be, and their capacity to sway the government or to persuade the government to backtrack on its steps has certainly been diminished.